President and founder of Have Anita Ministry, a faith-based nonprofit that promotes the human interaction of sharing what we have and expressing what we need. The guests in the podcast are the people who I have connection stories with and have something meaningful to share in their communities of connection. Thank you for listening. Let's share. Today, I am very honored to introduce you to an amazing woman, Shelby Kearns, who is the Community Engagement Fundraiser for a very important organization in Marion County called CASA Marion. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about her or it because I want her to introduce herself and the organization for the best clarity. So welcome, Shelby, and thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. And just to share a little bit more about CASA, or Community Action Stops Abuse Marion. So we've been in our community for about a year and a half. So we launched our services in January of 2024 when we didn't have a domestic violence center in Marion County. And at the time we opened, and this is still the case, Marion County ranks third in the state for domestic violence. But when we launched our services, we understood, as a lot of other domestic violence centers do, that you really can't get a person lasting safety if you don't look after the whole person. And so we offer comprehensive case management that looks after a person's legal needs, financial, emotional, childcare. And as part of their case management, when they stay in the shelter, they're there for about 45 days until they need an extension. And it would culminate oftentimes with a person taking advantage of our housing department and being able to move into a rental unit of their own. But in addition to our emergency shelter and 24/7 hotline, we also have an outreach office. And that's where someone would walk in during business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, to get screened either for shelter if they are a high lethality case, or they would go into our outreach office if maybe they don't need a shelter stay, but they need some of those other services.
It is an amazing and such an important organization. And wouldn't it be great if we could figure out how to make it have to disappear because people weren't doing this anymore? But unfortunately, the world that we're in, very challenging. And I'm sure many, many people do not know that Marion County is number 3 in the state. That is a very serious concern. And the fact that this has only been open a year and a half, let's hope that it crashes far lower than number 3 because of the service that you're providing in this area. And I have to say that I feel like one of the things that I'd really like to know is the balance between the proactive effort to help people that are in the crisis and the proactive effort to educate people on domestic violence and what's going on. So do you have some things to share on that?
Yeah, and like you said, that's our ultimate vision, a society free of domestic violence. We would love to work ourselves outside of a job, not only in Marion County, but elsewhere. But unfortunately, until that happens, we have seen a lot of demand this year. I think it's because there was a period of time where people didn't know we were here and more people are learning about us. And so in 2024, we still served quite a few people, even though the awareness wasn't there in the community. So we saw 915 adults and children. That was both at our shelter and non-residential outreach office. And we think based on so far in 2025, the people we've seen at shelter and outreach, we think will serve even more than that this year. And we think, again, it's that awareness that's kept the shelter at capacity. But yeah, you also asked about prevention, because ultimately we really have to start instilling those norms when people are younger. People will think that violence is an acceptable answer, whether that violence, again, is physical, emotional, spiritual, economic, if they aren't taught otherwise when they're younger. And so we do run a prevention program. We do community education that also is more on the intervention side of things. So that would be something like a bystander intervention training that we can do in corporate settings, or we've done them for the counselors before for the school district. We've done trainings for the health department. And that would teach someone, okay, when you come across a client or someone else who you think might be experiencing domestic violence, how do you safely intervene? And the emphasis is on the word safely, just because leaving is such a dangerous time for the victim that it's something that has to be done delicately and with a lot of careful planning with the advocates that we have over here, answering the hotline at the shelter. So we teach somebody, how do you find someone and get them to CASA services? And then again, for the less intervention, more prevention and upstream side of things, we run the Peacemakers program. So that's a curriculum we have. We have one for elementary students and then a separate one for middle and high school students, just so it stays developmentally appropriate. But that asks them, how do you be at peace? How do you be a peacemaker in your community? So there are 6 units in the curriculum. They're each about an hour to go through. Unit 1 starts with talking about expressing their emotions, and then they get into conflict resolution. How do you communicate well with others? And then they learn anti-bullying and teen dating violence prevention before they also talk in Unit 6 about general wellness and how to serve their community. And so we've done that at Pace Center for Girls before. We've done that elsewhere in the Department of Juvenile Justice, and most recently we did it at Hands of Mercy everywhere in Bellevue.
Oh, that's a really incredible thing. And is it a course that you have people that teach it, or is it a course that people can access and teach to others?
It's one that we facilitate. So if anyone's interested in peacemakers, they can get in touch with me. And we've done sessions virtually too. So that works best for the youth in the program. They can log into Zoom, but it's something that I've done on site as well.
I think that's great that you have that option, because sometimes people, they need to access a Zoom in this type of opportunity, and it's a great chance to. So if you were to continue to progress on something like this in general, what do you project as the 5 to 10 year vision?
I would say first and foremost to have our basic needs met. We have a very generous community. We've been really fortunate in that anytime we've put out a need, it's been met. And so I will say the way that we're structured is we do get state and federal grants from entities like the Florida Department of Children and Families, which also monitors us as a kind of quality control as the certified center in Marion County. And the federal grants include money from Housing and Urban Development for a Housing Program and then VOCA, or the Victims of Crimes Act. But as part of our grants, the funding is restricted. So we can't spend it on anything, and it mostly goes towards our basic case management services. And that means that, for example, not all of our food is covered. Not all of the toiletries and other basic needs for our participants is covered. That means that when victims take advantage of our housing program and they move into a new rental unit, they have that rental unit, but it's going to be unfurnished. They're not going to have cleaning products. They're not going to have those things you would need to make a house feel like a home. Or we might get clothing donations, but we might not have exactly what this person needs for this specific occasion. So maybe she has 3 days notice that she has a job interview, and she goes through what we have and says, there's not anything that quite fits me or is appropriate for this interview in this context. And so we also have to raise quite a bit of unrestricted revenue every year for CASA that ends up being about $1 million a year, so that we can meet those most basic necessities so that victims can thrive, and that they leave the shelter and they feel like they're set up for success, and they don't feel pressure to then go back to the abuser because they can't live on their own with themselves and their children. But I would say 5 to 10 years from now, we have some other visions. We actually have a sister location in Pinellas County. So that's how CASA was started, is that in Marion County, we needed a pre-existing certified center to oversee services because of how certification works with the Florida Department of Children and Families. And the one center in the state that was willing to do that was CASA. CASA in Pinellas County. So they have their headquarters over there, which started in, I think, 1977. And then, of course, in January of 2024, they expanded to Marion. And so we have those two locations. They're financially separate. So when someone supports either through an in-kind donation or even a monetary donation, it stays here to help Marion County victims and their children. But that being said, there are some services over there that we'd really like to see over here. So we've had some people express interest in helping us build a pet kennel. We do take pets over here at CASA, but I think that process would be a lot easier if we have a good place to put them. It'll be better both for all the residents here and also for the pets. They would have a little bit more room of their own and be able to be outdoors rather than inside in one of our rooms here. And then we'd also like to add on to our space. We're really grateful that we have the space that we have, but we're hoping to expand and build a playground just so there's a better outdoor area for our victims and their children. And we would like to have, a gym and a boutique. At some point, we'd also really like to open a thrift store. The thrift store in Pinellas County does really well and is able to raise about $1 million a year that all goes back to helping the victims and the children served by CASA. So those are kind of our big picture goals, but in the near future, what we really need is that unrestricted revenue so we can be flexible and meet whatever needs we see show up at shelter and at our outreach office.
Great. I noticed on your website you have a good page that discusses a few different things that people could do. And one of them is kind of interesting that you have an Amazon wish list, which is a great thing for sometimes people to be able to give through that. Do you have that always there, or is it certain seasons?
We always keep our Amazon wish list up. We will change it to be a little bit more seasonal as we get closer to November and December around the holidays. We have some holiday giving campaigns, but I would say right now, one of the best ways to support CASA Marion will be through Gift for Marion. So as we get closer to the date and as early giving opens on September 9th, it'll be kind of hard to miss it in the community. So it'll be on billboards, it'll be on social media banners, it'll kind of be all over Marion County. But once early giving starts, we then look forward to the 16th and 17th when the Gift for Marion portal will be open for about 33 hours. And it's that online giving campaign that's put on by the Community Foundation that benefits Marion County nonprofits. And CASA Marion's one of them. So we're going to put up our donate link on our website and on social media, and our newsletter will be emailing supporters and other people who might be interested in helping us through Gift for Marion. And Gift for Marion also has moments of matching and power hours that also helps donations go further. So if people want to support us financially, Gift for Marion's a great time to do it. But we're looking for volunteer help too, and we're looking for registrants for our scavenger hunt. So on November 15th, on a Saturday, we're having it for the first time, and we're hoping to make it an annual tradition. So we're looking both for sponsorships, but also for people to register teams to participate. And it's going to be a lot of fun, and people can go to our casamarion.org events page to click on that website to read a little bit more about getting involved. But if someone can't sponsor or even doesn't want to participate, we also do need a lot of volunteers that day.
Well, and one of the things that I also think is so important for people to recognize is the assumption is always that it's women that are in this, but that is not accurate. And I imagine the range of people is not all income, it's not all race, it's not all gender. It is a varied group of people that go through these type of things. And I'm sure that there's a varied group of people out in the world that could volunteer to serve.
Yeah, I mean, domestic violence knows no archetype. We get that question a lot when people come to tour or when we give community presentations. They'll ask, basically about demographic information, what's the breakdown you're seeing in the shelter, the outreach office? And I mean, we see everybody and we serve everyone. And I think that a lot of people will colloquially refer to CASA as the women's shelter. We will see men too. We don't see as many of them, and it's possible because they have maybe different needs than female victims, or it could also be possible that they don't know that they can receive services from CASA. But we do see them, not quite as many in the shelter, but more in our outreach office where people can walk in for those services. And maybe they don't need the shelter stay, but they do, for example, need help with a legal injunction, or they would like to take advantage of our housing program.
Sure that depending on the scenario, whether it's a spouse abusing a spouse or a spouse abusing a child, situations that take place, I would say that men may be less likely to express that they've been abused.
They do have barriers to coming forward. Stigma to being a male victim might be one of them. They could have that sense that's hard to shake to come forward. And I think another one too is abusers can be very cunning and try to take advantage of various systems, including the criminal justice system. So maybe the abuser beats the victim to filing an injunction. So from the eyes of many who are looking at that case, they could come across as the victim rather than the abuser. So I think that's another challenge.
Yeah, well, I've been around the planet a little bit longer than you, and I can tell you that even back in different seasons of life, I've known scenarios of the women being the abuser and
Mm-hmm.
experiencing situations that are very challenging in that. It's something that's real. And I do feel that it's really important. And I love that the very first page that you open up on the website, you guys provide some statistics for people to assess right away.
Mm-hmm.
The 1 in 3 women are victims of domestic violence. 1 in 4 men. 1 in 4. Wow, that's not significantly different in size. And then 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence. 7 in 10 survivors reported that their abuser also targeted pets. Tell me a little bit more about that. What's that?
Oh, about targeting pets.
Yes.
That's one of the ways that one person might exert power and control over another. Maybe they're never physically violent to the victim, but they hurt their pets. And that's just a way of getting the other person to be subservient and to follow orders. But that's one of the reason we take pets at the shelter. No questions asked. We've had dogs and cats and everything in between because we know there will be people who they're not going to leave the relationship if they can't also bring their pets. And those statistics, I think, tend to shock people when we do community education, but the 1 in 4 men having a lifetime prevalence of experiencing domestic violence is one of the more surprising ones. But when we wrap up the presentation, we often get a lot of people who come up to us who have disclosures. They want to share their story of being a survivor from 10 years ago. They want to talk about a friend or a sister or a neighbor or a coworker it's happening to. And we've had a few men come up to and say, I used to be in a violent relationship, or one of my male buddies is in a violent relationship. And so it just speaks to how unfortunately universal the experience of abuse is. If it hasn't happened to somebody, it's very likely it's happened to someone they love.
Humans are basically the source of the good and the bad. And the people that receive the abuse obviously need a lot of care and support and treatment, but also the people that commit the abuse. And I've seen that as a former executive director of a mental health organization, seen how there are some therapists that are willing to work with the people that are the abuser as much as the people that have been. Not everybody wants to work with the person that's abuser, but they're humans too. And there's something to be known about how you guys manage some of that as well. I would assume that you have some experience in seeing the importance of that side too.
Right, and that's part of the goal with doing something like Peacemakers is unfortunately with some of the settings we're presenting in, these will be young people who experienced abuse in their household. And so for some of them, abuse is one of those experiences that makes it likely that there will be bad outcomes later in life. So it's one of those ACEs or adverse childhood experiences that we know a lot about from the Centers for Disease Control or the CDC. And so the question for us is, okay, how do we break that cycle? And so some of that is instilling norms. And in the shelter too, we also try to model love and care and healthy relationships with adults. So that could be case managers doing crisis counseling with the children here. That could be setting up space to allow parents and children to maybe for the first time ever enjoy spending time together. So we do weekly family movie nights. We also have our case managers lead children in crafts and discussion as a way to do a healthy activity and talk about a theme for the month. And so if we could model those norms here in shelter, and if we could also extend that kindness, that compassion to those we're seeing at the outreach office, maybe it's something that's not going to be repeated once the children reach adulthood.
Because a lot of times the ripple effect is if it happens to them down the road, they leverage using it because that's what they've seen and experienced, and you're giving them the opportunity to see and experience something completely different. And that's very important to see that and know how to deal with conflict and challenges with people. And I think that is such an important component of what you want to do is not just dealing with the crisis, but actually moving to the prevention. It's a great So I'm also fascinated because I think you just have a fantastic personality. I think you're just so compassionate. I hear it in you. You're very knowledgeable in this area. And I think it'd be wonderful for people to know just a little bit more about you. Why you? Why are you doing this? Where did you start? How did this bring you to Marion County to do all this?
So I didn't grow up in Marion County, even though my husband was born here, but we actually met in college in Texas. And so when he graduated in 2019, he was then active duty in the Army for about 4.5 years. And so being an Army wife, you kind of get used to moving from one place to another. And maybe you have a certain educational or professional background, but when you arrive at a community, you just kind of ask, what's the need and where can I use my gifts? And so when we lived in Lawton, Oklahoma for his training, it was during the pandemic. So I had kind of a part time temp job that then came to a close once everything shut down. So we were there for about 5 months. And then again, still during the pandemic, we moved to Fairbanks, Alaska. So that's about a 2 hour drive south of the Arctic Circle. It's very remote. The community faces a different set of challenges than I see in Marion County just because of its isolation and also the weather and the seasonality. So, of course, when you go through winter, you have your close to 24 hours of darkness, and you also have weeks where it's going to be anywhere from -20 to -40. But when I moved to Fairbanks, I had kind of an education background. So I had a master's in the humanities with an emphasis on English literature. So I'd mostly been teaching and writing and editing at the time. But when I moved to Fairbanks, I saw an opportunity to work at a domestic violence center. So the one over there is called the Interior Alaska Center for Nonviolent Living. And it's a large nonprofit that's been around for a long time. And I think since then, they've kind of spun off into several organizations. But at the time I was working there, they not only ran the domestic violence center, but they also had a reentry center. They had supervised visitation. They had batter intervention classes, which is kind of what you talked about earlier, is, how do you work also with the abuser to change their norms? They ran the state's suicide crisis line. And when I worked for the Interior Alaska Center in Fairbanks, I was doing more so their prevention work. So some of the community education that I'm doing now, but I would also do a lot of youth positive development programs like Girls on the Run. I would do health class presentations for middle and high school students. I would do Green Dot Bystander Intervention training. And then when we moved away from Alaska, we were back in Oklahoma, not completely sure how long we were going to live there before my husband officially exited the Army and we were back coming to Florida to move back to his hometown. And so again, I worked in education, writing and editing. And then when I came back to the domestic violence field, it was because we moved to Marion County and I saw that there was a place that was called CASA Marion that was looking for a development coordinator. And so I was really excited to re-enter.
It's amazing that there was just a whole season of preparation, and it turns out that it's right back to where your husband is from. I think it's so interesting that order of your steps, and just really clearly, I think that it's something in your heart to serve and to be a part of this. It's a beautiful thing. Again, that's a big piece of the component of being involved in any sort of nonprofit that serves the community, is just having the right heart for it. Apparently, you're definitely been prepared and gone through all this. And you even have listed in your bio that you have a church in the area that you're committed to. And, that's a big component too that sometimes drives us to serve.
It is, personally, that is my telos or my purpose. And just to speak again, just personally for a moment, this is what drives me, Shelby. Although I know people will have different motivations for entering this field, is our ultimate telos as a human is to be Christ-like while we're here on earth. However difficult that is to achieve and however much grace we need to be able to do so, because we need a lot of help and can't do it on our own. But the ultimate end, of course, of all of that is union with God. And I think one of the virtues that's most helpful to helping a person be able to do so is the virtue of charity. And it's something that I've learned a lot about from reading St. Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologica. He talks about charity at length as a kind of special friendship, a friendship with God and a love of another person for God's sake. And so I really enjoy the community education role because it's a gift to have people come up and share their experience and why they would like to help CASA. And so when someone makes that disclosure and comes up and say, "Hey, I was a survivor 10 years ago. I left and I really want to give back and here's how I envision helping other people." It's nice to be in a community role where you can take the time to really stop and listen to them and not think, "Okay, I've got to get on to the next thing." It's no, this person is in front of me and this is what we're doing right now. And so charity is something that admittedly I'm imperfect at, but I'm working at every day. And I think this role has strengthened it more than any other that I've experienced.
I think that one thing that people, I've heard these testimonies so many times, is you come in thinking you're giving, and then you walk away going, oh my goodness, I received more than I could have ever possibly given. And I'd love to hear, whether it's you or if you have some other story or somebody that you noticed that shared something like that, where they came in thinking, I'm doing this service, and then turned around and was like, wow, this really made a difference for me too.
Yeah, I have a couple. And, if you'll indulge me for a little bit, this will be
Sure.
kind of lengthy, but only because we do have a really generous community and we see acts of giving and selflessness all the time. So much so that it can be difficult to really list it all and thank someone. And actually, that's why, my husband and I moved here because he was born here and he has family in the area. And it's important to us that as we start our own family, we live next to family. But we've lived here a little over a year, so we got here in May of 2024. And when we reached the 1 year anniversary, we said we didn't just move here conveniently, to be close to family. We actually really like it here, so we want to stay. And this is part of it too. So I'll say that when a previous shelter had shut down, I think it was in August of 2023, CASA was able to get up and running by January of 24, and to not only open so that victims had a place to go and no longer had to go without services. It was really hard to do. Not only to open, but also to stay open and make sure it's actually a nice, hospitable place that people want to be, and that there are services that are performed with the utmost compassion and excellence and even charity, where that is a motivator for some of our staff. And so this is something that couldn't have happened without our board. And so we have 4 board members here in Marion County. We have Ken Osley, Commissioner Michelle Stone, David Tillman, and Sheriff Billy Woods, and then also our advisory board. So they did a lot to even find the shelter. We owe our location to the fact that people like Lieutenant Clint Smith, with the sheriff's office, was able to spot the location, and then the county was able to fund the shelter so we could do the renovations that we needed. But our other advisory board members include April McDonald, Angie Clifton, Jean Henningsen, Beth McCall, Sergeant Tanya Rodriguez, and Deborah Velez. They offer continuous guidance to CASA, and they also spend a lot of time ensuring that people in Marion County know we're here in the first place. And then lastly, he's not on our advisory board, but he was very key in introducing us to the community and getting community buy-in. And through his enthusiasm, helping victims know that they could come forward and have a safe place for themselves and their children. That would be our mayor, Ben Marciano. But kind of on the other side of that coin, I think that in terms of not things that CASA has received from our board and advisory board, but in terms of what are some things that we think we can give, but then feel like actually we receive a lot more in the process. And I think it's, for me personally, getting to watch my coworkers do what they do. So I spend probably 50% of my day, sometimes more depending on the day, out of the office doing a lot of engagement, tabling, letting people know we're here, trainings, and other community engagement and presentations. But it's our case managers who are doing kind of the on the ground advocacy, doing that real work of sitting across from victims and their children and finding out exactly what does this person need to not only survive but also to thrive. And so getting to watch what they do is a privilege for me. Most recently, I overheard a case management session that just absolutely blew me away. And it was one of our advocates. Her name's Brandy, and I think she is just absolutely the best at what she does. I heard her talking to one of the victims we're serving, and this is someone who's kind of reaching the end of her 45 days and has done a lot of her case management so that she can leave shelter and be set up for success. And Brandy had told her, when you move into your apartment with your children, when you leave CASA, when you get this place of your own and are able to make it a home, I want you to understand that that wasn't CASA, that you did that. You were the one who decided to escape and find safety for you and your children. And so I don't want you to credit us. I want you to be proud of being a survivor and being resilient and doing what you need to do for your children, because that was really hard. Yeah. Sorry. And I have to pause a little bit. Yeah, it's really easy to get teary about it because I can't tell you how many times people come here and I think that they've been experiencing abuse for years. So their father might have treated them a certain way as they got a little bit older. They had a boyfriend or a husband or a girlfriend or a wife who treated them a certain way, and that's all they've ever known. It's like a fish in water, and they come into the shelter where they're treated in a dignified way for the first time. And so when I heard Brandy talking to this person, I said, yeah, it all makes sense now. Now I understand why people can maybe come here and relax for the first time. And so it's a gift to be able to watch case managers do their thing.
A beautiful thing for you to say, and all the things that they're doing to just have a gift to see that people are experiencing. It's so special. Safety. It is awesome that this organization is able to have somebody like you to be the networking person and to collaborate with people, because I feel like this is really your calling for sure. That you're willing to learn, you're willing to see, and you're willing to share about the organization and help people to learn more about something that really impacts all of us. It really does. We want our community to be healthy, to have the safety for everybody from young to middle to old. And we want to see a different outcome than number 3 on the list, the worst in the state. So thank you so much for sharing all these different elements. And I'm really very hopeful that people will be willing to check in with the organization. And I would love for you to just share some of the places that they can find things about CASA.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for having me on. And I think that your ministry is indispensable. And one thing we found too is, though we haven't been open for very long, with the help of our board, with the help of our advisory board, with the help of every community group that decides to do something for CASA, is we see a lot of ownership to reducing domestic violence in the community. So when I talk to people about it, I don't see the mindset that people say, oh, this is a CASA problem. And people also shoulder some of that role and being able to do what they can. And by hosting me here today, I think that you're certainly doing that. And I hope that more people get our hotline number and can find out a little bit more information about us, because I know that there's a lot of eagerness to give back. So I would say that they can reach out to me if they're interested in any kind of volunteer opportunity, third party fundraiser, other way to raise awareness. So they can give me a call at my work cell phone, 727 710 0667. They can also email me at shelbyk@casamarion.org. That's SHELBYK. They can go to our website, casamarion.org. On our website, if you go to our main page, you can sign up for a monthly newsletter to stay up to date about what we have going on. Domestic Violence Awareness Month is coming up in October, and so one of the best ways to raise awareness is to invite someone from CASA to a community presentation. So that could be your workplace, that could be a social or a civic group that you're in, that could be your church. I'm happy to come and do a presentation as long as someone will have me. So if they just need a spiel for a few minutes, I can do that. If they need a more extended time to really talk about services, but also bystander intervention, and leave plenty of time for questions and answers, I can do that as well. And then again, Gift for Marion, but also our upcoming scavenger hunt on November 15th are some of the best ways to get involved. And we'll be posting updates not only through our website and newsletter, but also our Facebook and Instagram pages.
Great. And if you go to the rss.com version of this, you'll see I will have those listed in the description of this organization and this conversation today. And I'm just so happy that we have this opportunity to share together. And I wish you all the best and everything that's coming up. It's going to be a very wonderful season to serve this organization and to see what's going to happen with the fundraising, what's going to happen with the event coming up in November, and, really know that even those things that are not on the front line of what's happening are the foundation of how to help this organization do all that it's doing in the background. We don't get to see what it's doing. It's very important. So let's jump in, pray for this organization. Let's jump in, invest in this organization in any way that you feel led to do. And again, Shelby, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for sharing your time listening to this Let's Share podcast. Our hope is that you receive some inspiration to give and receive, because giving plus receiving equals sharing. If you want to learn more about Have a Need a Ministry, go to haveaneedaministry.com. Look forward to connecting soon.